Hokage give me a face. Conan, Chapter 101-117. Chapter 101 Bandage Freak. After hearing Xiaolan's shout, the man suddenly turned his head and glanced at Yizan and Xiaolan. It's okay if he doesn't look, the look back shows his entire face, and his head is covered with bandages. Except for the pair of eyes that are exposed, he can't see other features on his body at all. And his eyes are very terrifying, they are covered with fresh Yuhi's bloodshot, and people can't help but tremble when they see it. Ah! Xiaolan exclaimed in surprise after seeing the guy's first glance. Yizan was also a little surprised. He didn't expect to meet such a suspicious guy here, and his face changed immediately. Just when Yizan wanted to chase after him, the guy ran away, and in a blink of an eye, he ran to the other side of the chain bridge. Yizan, that guy is so scary, should we go and inform Yuanzi and the others? Xiaolan hid behind Yizan and pulled his arm tightly. It seemed that she was frightened by the guy. 30. Squinting his eyes slightly, Yizan said, "All right, let's go over and see the situation first." Soon, Yizan and Xiaolan walked to the villa. The two of them just knocked on the door. After waiting for a long time, the guardian came out and opened the door. When they saw Yizan and the others, they said excitedly, "You guys are finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Yuanzi. Xiaolan just opened her mouth and was about to say something. When she was interrupted by Yuanzi, she stretched out her index finger and hurriedly said, "Xiaolan, let me tell you. There are several handsome guys here today, you can help me take a look when the time comes, which one is better?" Saying that, Yuanzi also made a nymphal look, looking very happy, as if she liked this kind of affair. Yizan couldn't help but said, "A handsome guy is standing in front of you, didn't you see it?" As soon as these words came out, Yuanzi covered his mouth and smiled softly. "I really like a handsome guy like you, but you are Xiaolan's. If I snatch you over, Xiaolan will be angry." After saying that, Yuanzi also blinked at Yizan, looking like he wanted to seduce Yizan. "Sonoko, what nonsense are you talking about? After all, Xiaolan is still the kind of conservative girl, so she still feels a little uncomfortable with what Sonoko said." On the other hand, Yizan, after seeing Yuanzi's actions, raised the corner of his mouth slightly and showed a smile. He couldn't help feeling that the garden in front of him was really an open girl. If there was a chance, he wouldn't mind getting her. After a few chats, Yuanzi said, "Okay, let's go in quickly. This time is a class reunion organized by my old sister. They are all from the drama club, and they haven't been together for many years. Taking advantage of this opportunity, we all come here to gather together." Quote. "Really, the relationship between your sister and the others is really good," Xiaolan said enviously beside her. "Of course, we have to get together more in the future, Xiaolan," Yuanzi echoed beside him. Soon, the three walked into the villa. Under the guidance of Yuanzi, in the restaurant where they came together, there was already a dignified and virtuous woman busy inside. "Sister, my friend is here." As soon as Yuanzi came here, he greeted the woman who was busy. Yizan also saw this woman. She was only a few years older than Yuanzi at most. She was not bad, and she looked dignified. At first glance, she was the type of a good wife and good mother. Sister Yuanzi, who was wearing an apron, put down the rag in her hand, reached out to greet Yizan and the others, and immediately said with a smile, "You guys are here, take a good rest here. I'm making dinner, you can eat it later." "Oh. Okay, hard work." Yizan and Xiaolan greeted together and walked into the villa. While introducing the structure of the villa, Yuanzi looked at Yizan. Today's Yizan is also dressed very handsomely, which naturally attracts a girl like Yuanzi with a rippling heart. When he walked to the stairs, Yuanzi pointed to the second floor and said, "There are a lot of people here today, so there are not enough rooms. If you don't mind, Yizan, you and Xiaolan can sleep in the same room." "Ah, Yizan and I sleep in the same room," Xiaolan immediately exclaimed excitedly. Obviously she was not ready for this. "Shish," Sonoko hurriedly snorted, and then said in a low voice, There is no way. The 3 boys who came have already occupied a room. My sister and I both sleep in the same room. And the remaining 2 rooms, one I was told that the boy Yoshiko slept, and in the remaining room, only you and Yizan slept together, and Miss Yoshiko didn't seem to have a good temper, so she probably wouldn't like to sleep with others. Quote. After listening to Yuanzi's explanation, Shaolin pouted, not knowing what to say. Yizan, on the other hand, was extremely excited. He didn't expect that this seemingly dissolute garden was really a good person in 913. He actually knew what he wanted, and he also knew the beauty of an adult. However, in front of Shaolin, Yizan first consolidated his tall image, coughed slightly, cleared his throat and said, "Don't worry, Shaolin, if I'm here, I can protect you. After all, this is the wilderness." Quote. Che, I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, what's there to be afraid of? Shaolin muttered, carrying the line she brought with her, and walked up to the 2nd floor. Yizan quickly followed behind. After all, this was a good opportunity for him and Shaolin to be alone, and they were sleeping together, so how could he give up? After arriving on the 2nd floor, I did find that there were 6 rooms, and the first ones seemed to have been locked, and only the last one opened the door. Yizan smiled slightly, turned to Shaolin and said, "We should be in that room, let's go and have a look first." Although Shaolin was a little wary on the surface and slept with Yizan, she couldn't help being a little nervous and excited. After all, she didn't hate Yizan, and she even liked it a little bit. It is under this feeling that Shaolin can also feel that this night is destined to be extraordinary. Chapter 102-Share a Room. Now that she has found the room, Shaolin is not polite, and walks over quickly. After walking for so long in the forest, her feet are already very sore. Of course, she wants to find a place to rest. After the 2 came to the last room, Yizan also put the tea that he brought on the table at will, and saw that there was still tea on the table. He couldn't help but smile. Sister Yuanzi is really sensible. Everything is ready. After pouring 2 cups of tea, Yizan couldn't help but think evilly in his heart. If Sonoko's sister would prepare some condoms for herself in the drawer, maybe there would be a time when they might be useful. Shaolin, do you want some tea? Yizan brought the poured tea and put it beside Shaolin. After walking on the mountain road for so long, Shaolin was also a little thirsty. She picked up the tea and drank more than half of it, and let out a long sigh. This tea is really delicious. After putting down the teacup, Shaolin moved her sore hands and feet, turned her head and said to Yizan, "I'm going to take a shower, and my whole body smells of sweat." To look for clothes in her own line, Lee. Fortunately, the decoration of this villa is very good. Each room is equipped with a bathroom, which can be directly bathed in it. As soon as she heard that Shaolin was going to take a bath, Yizan's mouth showed a smile while she was drinking tea. Anyway, she didn't tell her to go out, so why was she willing to leave? When Shaolin was picking up the clothes, Yizan couldn't help but glanced aside, just in time to see that Shaolin took out an inner liner from the bag, and it turned out to be pink. I didn't expect that Shaolin, a girl with violent tendencies, who is a master of Taekwondo, would actually like this kind of nail. Although Shaolin took things very fast, Yizan still saw it clearly, and it still couldn't escape his eyes. Holding the clothes in her arms, Shaolin glanced at Yizan and said to him, "I'm going to take a bath first, you can't peek." At this time, how could Yizan say that he was peeking? He quickly showed a smile, and said very seriously, "Don't worry, I'm waiting for you here, I promise not to peek." It was also the first time for Shaolin to be in the same room with a boy. She was still very nervous, so she quickly grabbed her clothes and walked into the bathroom quickly. The bathroom in this room is made of that kind of frosted glass. From the outside, you can't see what's inside at all. Of course, this is only for other people. For Yizan, this is not a hindrance at all. As long as he uses some means, this layer of glass is dispensable. After hearing the sound of the door latch being pulled from the bathroom, a smile cracked at the corner of Yizan's mouth. He had been cultivating the understanding of fate, and he had never used fate to do business. This time, he finally found an opportunity. With Yizan's fingers waving, a very strange thing happened. In the bathroom, a gust of breeze blew in through the gap in the window, making Xiaolan feel a little cold. She turned her head and glanced at the window, but accidentally hung her hair on the door bolt. Xiaolan pulled her hair down because of the dislocation. I didn't find that the door latch of the bathroom was pulled open by myself. The bathroom door just opened a small gap. Well, yes, all of this is Yizan's masterpiece. Well, in Yizan's opinion, what he is doing now is the right thing, and the things he did before were all that he was not doing the right thing. At the same time, Xiaolan's graceful figure was also displayed in front of Yizan's eyes, but because Xiaolan was putting hot water, Yizan was blocked by the fog when he saw an impulsive back. These fogs are really annoying, Yizan muttered in his heart, just as he was about to use his destiny ability to take these things away. There was a knock on the door, followed by Yuanzi's voice. Xiaolan, Yizan, why haven't you come out yet? It's still early, let's go out for a walk. Hearing this voice, Yizan temporarily stopped using his destiny perception ability, and replied to Yuanzi outside the door. Wait a minute, Xiaolan is taking a bath, we will come out soon. Oh, Yuanzi said outside. In that case, Yizan, please help me take out the box in the room, and I will take it down and give it to my sister. Okay, Yizan agreed, and hurriedly went to the room to look for it, and found a small black box on the table. Picking up the box, Yizan walked to the door, opened the door, took the small black box out, and handed it to Yuanzi. In the garden at the door, after taking the box, he secretly blinked his eyes and said to Yizan, "Spring evening moment is worth 1,000 gold, you should seize the opportunity." Seeing Yuanzi's smile, Yizan couldn't help thinking in his heart that it seemed that she knew a lot. After finishing speaking, Yuanzi went downstairs with his things. Yizan quickly closed the door and returned to that position. Just as he was about to continue to use his destiny perception ability, Xiaolan suddenly pushed open the bathroom door, and from inside came out. Her hair still looked a little watery. Xiaolan was wiping it with a dry towel. She also changed into a short skirt, looking full of youthful vigor. Yizan, did Yuanzi come over just now? Xiaolan said while wiping her hair. Yeah, she just came over to get something, and she's already gone. Yizan replied, but he was a little unhappy in his heart. If it wasn't for Yuanzi, he would have seen Xiaolan's graceful figure all over again. I won't be standing here either. After searching around the room, Yizan found a hairdryer and handed it to Xiaolan. Use this, your hair will dry faster. Thank you. Xiaolan took the hairdryer, sat next to the chair, and blew in front of the mirror. Xiaolan's hair was of good quality, but as soon as it was blown by the hairdryer, her black and beautiful hair swayed in the wind, and the fine white skin on her neck made Yizan couldn't help but take a few more glances. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yizan came to the window and carefully looked at the surroundings of the villa, and found that this place is really remote. Except for the suspension bridge, there is no other place to go out. Chapter 103_Pretend and Fool. Soon, Xiaolan's hair was also dried, and Yizan came downstairs with her, ready to go to the garden. She just said that everyone would go downstairs together. In the garden below where I helped my sister organize things, I saw Yizan and Xiaolan came down, and they quickly walked over and said, "Why did you come down? I've been waiting for you for a long time." At this time, in the restaurant on the first floor, besides Sonoko and her sister, there was a man and a woman below. The woman was sitting at the dining table, with short hair that matched her ears, and was wearing a short skirt that matched her hips. She had a very good figure, and her face was a little thin. Moreover, the temperament of this woman is very good, and she belongs to the kind of beauty who will make people look at her wherever she goes. There was also a man in a white suit with long hair, standing by the windowsill, smoking a cigarette slowly, looking a bit like a melancholy prince. "Quick, come here and let me introduce you." Yuanzi took Xiaolan's hand and hurried to the restaurant on the first floor. Pointing at the woman with a very good temperament, Sonoko quickly said, "This is my sister's good friend, the screenwriter of his 450 drama club, Miss Akeda Kai Yoshiko. As soon as she heard the name, Xiaolan's face changed a few times. She covered her mouth in surprise, and then said, Sonoko, is she a well-known screenwriter and writer? Miss Yoshiko Akeda, it's hot on TV right now. Is the Youth Paradise broadcast by her work? That's right, he is Miss Yoshiko Akeda. Sonoko's sister walked over from the kitchen with a plate of fruit and replied with a smile. The man who was smoking by the window also took a puff of cigarette and said lightly, I heard that our big screenwriter is going to write another play. Wow, it's really amazing. Xiaolan said with some admiration, and Yizan just gave her a faint look. The man opened his mouth, and Yuanzi continued to pull Xiaolan to introduce. This is also a member of the drama club, Big Brother Oda. When he said this, Sonoko deliberately lowered his voice and said in Xiaolan's ear, he is so handsome, just the type one like. Yizan was next to him, and after hearing this clearly, he couldn't help thinking that this garden liked this type of long hair, and the prince who was called last time also had very long hair. However, the guy called Oda put his eyes on Yizan, because he felt that his handsomeness did not want to get up and down with the guy in front of him. Okay, please ignore this self-lovers overestimate their looks. Squinting his eyes slightly, Oda snuffed out the cigarette butt in his hand, then walked over to Yizan, stretched out his hand and smiled slightly. Your girlfriend is so beautiful, my name is Oda, hello. When he said this, Oda also looked at Xiaolan's body, and he didn't keep his appreciative eyes, making Xiaolan look yuhi. This guy's naked provocation made Yizan's face a little unkind, blocking the guy's gaze at Xiaolan, and at the same time he stretched out his hand and clasped Oda tightly, the corner of his mouth raised. My name is Yizan. Quote. I'm a master black belt in Taekwondo. Oda's tone raised, his right hand suddenly began to increase strength, a huge force came from his palm, and he held Yizan tightly. Hey, funny. In an instant, this idea popped into Yizan's head, a mere human being dared to act in front of him. I thought it would make Yizan suffer, but Oda didn't expect that Yizan just hit back a little, and Oda felt his muscles twitch violently. Although his palms hurt a lot, next to the beautiful woman, Oda still maintained a very graceful appearance, but the smile on his face looked a little weird, and even that smile was shaking. Originally wanted to make fun of Oda, but when he thought that he was just here as a guest, Yizan dismissed the idea and let go of Oda's hand, which was considered to let him go. Quickly retracting his hand, Oda put his hand on his back, shaking constantly, and there was some cold sweat on his forehead. He was sure that if he moved a little slower, the bones of his hand would be broken. The garden next to him is not a stupid person. He can see that the emotions between the two are a little off, and he quickly said, Big Brother Oda, we haven't had dinner yet, let's go out for a walk. Jungcho didn't go down the steps, and Oda nodded immediately. Okay, let's go out and enjoy the beautiful scenery together. Xiaolan beside Yizan, Oda didn't dare to be half-coveted. He was sure that if he dared to do that, Yizan would beat him into a meat-chan. The first time he asked Oda to go out, he succeeded. Sonoko was also a little excited. He quickly put his hand on Oda's arm, and the two walked out the door together. Yizan, let's go out for a walk too, it's hard to come here. Xiaolan also said beside Yizan, looking hopeful. Okay, Yizan naturally would not refuse this request. So the four of them walked out of the villa one after the other and went for a walk in the forest outside, which was considered to pass the time. Before leaving, Sonoko's sister did not forget to ask them to come back early for dinner. As soon as he walked out of the gate of the villa, Yuanzi was about to part ways with Yizan and the others. After all, Yuanzi wanted to stay with the handsome guy for a while. But it happened that Yizan also wanted to spend more time with Xiaolan. The two chose a relatively secluded path and walked over leisurely. Although it was already dusk, the scene in the mountains and forests was still so vibrant. Many birds had just returned to their nests, and there were hares running by from time to time on the big trees, and there was a beautiful sunset. Seeing some small flowers in front of her, Xiaolan couldn't help but say, Wow, those flowers are really beautiful, let's go take a look. But at this time, Yizan suddenly felt a little bloated in his lower abdomen, and felt like he wanted to understand the trumpet. His brows wrinkled slightly. Yizan said to Xiaolan, "I'm sorry, I drank too much tea just now, and now I'm a little bit tired. Want that?" Chapter 104_Bandaged Freak's Axe. Although Yizan didn't finish her words, Xiaolan already knew what it meant. She covered her mouth with a smile and said, "Then go ahead, I'll wait for you here." Okay. Yizan smiled slightly, and hurriedly walked over to a big tree not far away. This is a wilderness in the wild, where there is so much to manage, and it can be solved anywhere. Xiaolan, on the other hand, walked into that patch of flowers by herself, where there were colorful flowers blooming very brightly, so she restrained herself and leaned down gently to smell it. Occasionally see one or two very delicate flowers, Xiaolan will want to pick it off, but when she thinks that this is a living thing, Xiaolan holds back and just enjoys it here. At this moment, behind Xiaolan, a tall figure appeared, and the shadow shone on the flowers through the rays of the setting sun. Xiaolan also saw the shadow, and thought it was Yizan who came back. With a happy face, she quickly turned her head. Yi. Before she could say the remaining word, Xiaolan was stunned. The person behind her was Yizan, but a tall man wearing a black cape, a strange hat, and bandages all over her body. Man. They had seen this man before, the guy they saw before the suspension bridge came in, but at this moment, the bandaged weirdo held a shiny axe and aimed at Xiaolan. Ah! As soon as she saw the axe, Xiaolan couldn't help but scream. Boom! It was also at this time that a thunderbolt suddenly appeared in the sky, and the dark clouds in the distance filled the air in an instant. And at this time, the axe in the hand of the bandaged geek moved, and without hesitation, he slashed at Xiaolan, and the rapid movement left a scratch in the air. Shoo! Taking advantage of the moment when the axe just fell, Xiaolan hurriedly stepped back and quickly avoided the blow. This was precisely because she had practiced taekwondo, and her reaction speed was still relatively fast. However, the bandaged geek obviously didn't want to spare Xiaolan just like that. He rushed forward quickly, and hurriedly chased after him. After the axe in his hand was suddenly raised, he chopped it down again. Ah! Help! Although Xiaolan had practiced taekwondo, she still didn't know what to do in such a crisis, so she could only ask for help. As early as the moment he heard Xiaolan's cry, Yizan had already reacted. After finishing urinating, he rushed over quickly. The speed was much faster than that of ordinary people. Those weeds passing by his feet, they were all swaying from side to side. When Yizan rushed behind Xiaolan, the two were still more than 10 meters apart, but the axe in the hand of the bandaged monster had already slashed down at Xiaolan. At this moment, Yizan's eyes turned cold, and he quickly gathered his strength, all gathered on his right leg, and kicked out fiercely. What he kicked was not a man or an axe, but a pebble on the ground. Bang! Suddenly there was a muffled sound, and the stone on the ground suddenly flew up, hitting the bandaged weirdo's wrist at an accurate angle. In an instant, the wrist was pierced with blood. The hole, but unfortunately the stone is not big, so it is not fatal. Ah! After being kicked by the stone, the bandaged freak cried out in pain. The axe in his hand fell directly, looked at Yizan angrily and terrified, then quickly got into the forest, and escaped and disappeared. Yizan didn't chase after him, but hurried to Xiaolan's side, supported her, who was still in shock, and asked nervously, "How are you, aren't you hurt?" Xiaolan's face was a little ugly, but Yizan was by her side, so she felt relieved and shook her head. "I'm fine, fortunately you arrived in time." At this moment, from the other side of the path, Yuanzi and Oda also rushed over. As soon as they saw Yizan and the others, Yuanzi hurried over and asked, "What happened just now?" "We all heard Xiaolan's sharp call." Yizan did not hide it, and told them everything that had just happened. "What? There's a bandage weirdo." Oda's face suddenly changed, and he said with a gloomy expression, "According to what you said, indeed, when I first came in, I saw a man with bandages all over his body." Guy. As soon as he heard these words, Sonoko's face changed greatly. He glanced around in fear, and said nervously, "I'm getting more and more scared by what you said. why don't we go back first, it's really scary here. Seeing that Xiaolin was also in shock, Yizan nodded and said, all right, let's go back first and discuss this matter in the long run. Boom. And at this time, thunder also sounded in the sky, as if it was about to change to rain, so Yizan and the others hurried back to the villa. After waiting inside the villa, Yuanzi's sister hurried over and said to them, I thought you guys were lost. It took so long to come back, it's going to rain heavily. At this time, there were two more people in the whole house. One was a taller man in a brown leather jacket. He was holding a DV in his hand, and kept patting everything in the house. When he saw Yizan and the others came back, he couldn't help but lean forward and said, come on, our handsome guys and beauties, tell us about your experience going out this time. Yuanzi's sister smiled and said, don't take it offense, this is our classmate, Kakutani, who is in charge of the camera. DV in front of him away, waved to Yizan and the others, and said with a smile, hi, hello, I'm Zhaogu. Hello. Yizan and Xiaolin greeted Zhaogu first. At this time, another short, chubby guy came over from the utility room with a ladder, holding some other tools in his hand. When he passed Yizan and the others, he reached out and hit one, greeted, hi, I'm Takahashi, in charge of props. Yeah. Yizan nodded, seeing that everyone was here, and quickly said to everyone, it's all right here, I have something to tell you. When we went out just now, there was a guy with bandages all over his body. Launched an attack on Xiaolin. I don't know if you have seen it before. Chapter 105 Depressing Atmosphere. What? These words were like a bomb, and everyone's expressions suddenly changed, and their mouths opened in surprise. The fat man named Takahashi, with cold sweat on his face, said to everyone, is it a guy with bandages all over his body and a strange hat? When I first came in, I saw it on the side of the road. Yeah. Kakutani nodded slightly and said, I saw it too. At the time, I thought it was someone from the nearby village. I didn't expect to attack Xiaolin. It was really scary. Yuanzi's sister, as the owner of this place, is familiar with the situation here. After hearing what Yizan said, she covered her mouth slightly and said in a little panic, but there are only a few villas in the back. And it's been a long time since no one lived there, so where did that bandage freak come from? For a time, everyone fell into panic. After all, this is a dangerous thing. Even Yizan looked around. If there is no one nearby, there is only one possibility. The so-called bandaged freak is one of them. One between. Maybe the atmosphere was a little too depressing, and no one spoke. Yoshiko Ikeda, who has always been outgoing, changed his face and raised his voice. You are all too worrying about the world. Even if there are some weird bandaged people, it must be someone's prank. What is it? I'm so scared. Okay, I'm tired and I'm going to bed. Saying that, Ikidaichi Yoshiko went upstairs first. Before leaving, he was quite dissatisfied and muttered, stay at home. Well, why do you have this ghost party? It's a waste of fun and a waste of time. Seeing Yoshiko Ikeda's attitude, Oda, who was on the side, was unhappy, and snorted coldly, what's so great? People are famous, they're different, even I forgot about this. The other hand, the tall Kakutani waved his hand quickly and said, maybe I know that Yoshiko has been too busy recently, and I'm a little tired, so don't blame her. Oda still said with some dissatisfaction, Kakutani, you should discipline her well, I'm afraid you will suffer losses in the future. Hee, no, she treats me very well. Kakutani smiled and scratched his head, looking very happy. From this point of view, Yizan can guess that there must be some stories between them, especially this Kakutani, who has a somewhat different relationship with Yoshiko. After all, none of the people present knew how terrifying the danger Xiaolin faced at that time. Oda put his hands on his chest and said indifferently, I think it's good, let's close the doors and windows tightly, then what kind of bandage weirdo won't break in? Ha ha. Yizan laughed silently, thinking secretly in his heart, if the bandage geek really wants to break in, I am afraid that with the help of a few windows here, it is of no use at all, and it can be chopped off with an axe. Quote. Some fat gaucho, carrying this ladder, continued to walk to the second floor, and said to the crowd, "It looks like it's going to rain soon. There's some water leaks in this house. I'll go and fix it first." "That's really bothering you, Takahashi." Sonoko's sister smiled slightly and expressed her apology. After all, everyone came here to play, it would be bad if they were not happy. After all, it was so late. Yizan was also worried about Gao Chao's safety, so he said to the crowd, "I'm going to help Gao Chao too." "Thank you so much," Takahashi said with a smile. After Yizan and Takahashi went to repair the roof, the rest quickly closed the doors and locked the doors and windows. After all, everyone was still a little worried about the so-called bandage freak. After the doors and windows were closed, Sonozi's sister said with a worried expression, "Sonozi, you and Shaolin go to the kitchen to help bring out the food. I'm going to see Yoshiko, and it's time to come down to eat." "Okay, no problem." Shaolin and Yuanzi nodded and hurriedly did as instructed. Sonoko's sister went up to the second floor, came to Yoshiko's door, knocked on the door, and shouted from outside, "Yoshiko, it's time to eat, come out quickly." Yoshiko's voice came from the room. "No, I'm not feeling well, you guys should eat first." "Why don't you eat? We are all waiting for you," Sonoko's sister continued. But unexpectedly, after she finished saying this, Yoshiko seemed to be even more angry, and roared in the room, "I said if I don't eat, I don't eat, it's not annoying." So many years of friends, knowing that Yoshiko lost his temper like this, Sonoko's sister felt very sad, and said a little sadly, "Well, you have a good rest." After Yuanzi's sister came down, Yizan and Gaochao had already repaired the roof of the second floor, and they went downstairs with tools. Seeing Yizan and Takahashi, Yuanzi's sister still smiled and said to the two of them, "Hurry up and wash your hands and eat dinner, the food will be cold later." "Yeah," Yizan and Takahashi nodded, then turned to the kitchen to absorb, especially Takahashi, who said happily, "I haven't tasted your craftsmanship for so long, I'll have to do more later. Eat." At this time, the bathroom on the side of the first floor was opened, and the tall Kakutani, clutching his stomach, walked slowly 2.6 out of the way, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and said very uncomfortable, "I don't know if it's noon today. I've eaten something that makes my stomach feel sick." Looking at Kakutani coming out of the toilet, and Oda smoking by the window, he said with some dissatisfaction, "You guy, it's been almost half an hour since you just entered, I really admire you." "Hey, my stomach is not feeling well, I can't do anything about it." Kakutani scratched his head a little embarrassedly, and laughed and hit haha. "Okay, don't talk anymore, wash your hands and eat quickly." Sister Yuanzi, the master, quickly said to everyone. Soon, everyone was seated, and the table was filled with sumptuous food, and the smell of fragrance spread from there. Chapter 106 Knowing that Yoshiko was killed. Oda, who thought he was a bit cold, sat in front of the dining table, the corners of his mouth raised slightly, and he said a little unhappily, "What happened to our big screenwriter? Can't the young miss come down to eat?" Upon hearing this, Kakutani glanced at him rather unhappily and said in a low voice, "Oda, why are you always targeting Yoshiko?" Oda spread his hands and said very indifferently, "I just don't like her a little bit. When I became a great writer, I forgot all our former friends. Is this looking down on us?" Seeing Kakutani's appearance, he wanted to say something else, and Takahashi, who was next to him, quickly said, Okay, everyone is classmates, it's rare to get together, don't talk about so many unpleasant things." Someone became a peacemaker, and the two of them sat back in their original positions, looking very upset, and looked away from each other. The atmosphere suddenly became a little embarrassing, and Shaolin deliberately lowered her voice and whispered in a decibel that only she and Yizan could hear, "I feel that the relationship between their classmates is very complicated." Yizan shrugged slightly and said, "Let's still have something to eat, just come over for a visit." Wow! At this moment, there was a loud noise from the window outside the restaurant on the first floor, and then another figure rushed over. After hearing the sound, everyone hurriedly looked over. Suddenly, they only saw a strange man with bandages all over his body, who put a knife on Yoshiko's neck, took her away from the window, and disappeared immediately. Figure. Which bandaged weirdo is it? Yizan shouted quickly, and immediately ran out, chasing the direction where the shadow disappeared. Everyone else in the room quickly followed Yizan's footsteps and chased out. When Takahashi was chasing out, he didn't forget to turn around and say to the girl in the room, "Hurry up and close the doors and windows, and don't let others run away. Come in." After finishing speaking, Takahashi also ran out and chased in the direction of Yizan and the others. After chasing in the forest for a long time, Yizan tracked down a big tree, and the sky was completely dark at this time, and some light rain fell. Boom! As a flash of lightning lit up, Yizan looked beside him, and just saw a severed right hand, right under the big tree. What? After seeing this hand, Yizan's expression suddenly changed, and he quickly squatted down to check. This severed hand was dripping with blood. It looked like it had just been cut off, and it was very delicate. 9 times out of 10, he knew Yoshiko's. Takahashi, who was chasing him from behind, had only run for a while because he was a little fat. He couldn't help but pant for breath. Suddenly, he slipped to the ground. And the moment he slipped, he was lying on top of something, so he couldn't help but glance down, and his face suddenly changed with fright. Ah, it's a foot. Takahashi stepped back in fright. His courage was about to break, his face was very pale. I saw that not far from her, a bloody calf was still there. From the knee to the sole of the foot, it was just thrown on the ground, and the strong smell of blood was still distributed around. At this time, Kakutani, who came from behind, was so excited that he hurried to the front of the crowd and kept shouting, "No, Yoshiko, where are you?" When he ran to the front, he happened to see that in the rainy night, Yoshiko was lying on the grass, motionless, and lost one of his hands and feet. But even so, Kakutani ran over quickly, squatted down, hugged her tightly, and shouted, "You have to hold on, Yoshiko, I'll take you back right away." Saying that, Kakutani lifted Yoshiko up from the ground, looking very excited, but he didn't expect that when he exerted such force, a crack suddenly appeared in Yoshiko's head, which broke off from the neck, and instantly became two. Cut. A chubby head suddenly fell down and landed on the ground, blood suddenly and quickly emerged, and the frightened Kakutani suddenly screamed, "No, Yoshiko." The voice of grief, like the sharp sword piercing the heart, released all the sadness in Kakutani's heart. Oda, who came last, saw this scene. His face instantly became very ugly, his eyes widened a lot, and his legs couldn't help but feel a little weak, so he quickly retreated back. In a few steps, if it weren't for a big tree, he would have almost collapsed to the ground. How can this happen? Oda muttered to himself, as if he did not expect that Yoshiko would die so miserably. Yizan also saw Yoshiko's miserable state, but he didn't expect her silky shape to be so miserable. Who the hell was the bandage weirdo? For the first time, Yizan took a look at the 3 men present, hoping to find some clues on them. But in this situation, Yizan is not easy to suspect anyone. After all, everyone clearly saw that the bandaged weirdo disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. And more importantly, the figure of the bandaged weirdo was not similar to everyone present. Knowing that Kakutani and Yoshiko had an unusual relationship, Yizan stood up, walked to Kakutani's side, patted his shoulder lightly, and said to him, "Don't be too sad, everything has happened, so it's better to save it first. We must hurry back to the scene and call the police." Quote. Although Kakutani was very sad, he still listened to Yizan's words, nodded slightly, put down Yoshiko's body, then took off his jacket and covered the body first. Wiping away his tears, Kakutani said, "Don't worry, Yoshiko, I will definitely find the real murderer, and I will definitely avenge you." At this time, Yizan was more worried about Shaolin and the others. After all, there were several girls in the villa, and it would be bad if they encountered some weird bandaged people again. After keeping the corpse in place without moving, Yizan hurriedly took the three of them with Zhaogu and hurried back to the location of the villa. Chapter 107_Overnight at the Villa of Horrors. When Yizan and the others returned to the villa and told others about Yoshiko's death, everyone's expressions instantly became very ugly, especially Sonoko's sister, who was so frightened that she stomped on the sofa, her eyes widened. Become sluggish. How is that possible, knowing Yoshiko? Sonoko's elder sister looked solemn, as if she couldn't believe that these things were true. Shaolin also sat beside her, patted her back lightly, and said to her, "Don't be too sad, people can't be resurrected from the dead." Yizan glanced at everyone in the room, and then said, "I think it's fine, let's call the police first." Having said that, Yizan walked to the edge of the restaurant, picked up the phone, and called the police for help, but soon, the number he dialed received a burst of empty information, and the number could not be dialed at all. The phone line has been cut. Yizan put the phone back in its original position with a bad expression on his face. What? This news, like a thunderbolt, gave everyone a heavy blow. But then, Yizan took out his mobile phone from his pocket again and was about to call the police, but what he never expected was that his mobile phone could no longer receive a signal. The cell phone has no signal. Yizan bit Kiba slightly, his face a little solemn. In this era, there are not many people who can own a mobile phone, and the telephone lines built by the telephone company are not very perfect. Generally, only in the city can the phone be accurately dialed. Now in the deep mountains, Yizan mobile phone, naturally there is no signal. Boom! At this moment, in the night sky outside, there was another thunderbolt from the blue sky, and that flash of lightning illuminated the surroundings, making people feel a chill. Some fat Takahashi, his face changed with fright, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and suddenly shouted, "It must be him, that bandage weirdo, he is crazy, and wants to kill us all." Saying that, Takahashi ran outside without any heed, pushed open the door of the house, and shouted while running, obviously frightened. "Takahashi!" Everyone shouted from behind, and quickly chased after them. Under such circumstances, anyone who leaves the house will easily be in danger. After chasing Takahashi's footsteps all the way, when everyone came outside, they heard Takahashi screaming from a distance. Not good. Yizan's expression changed, as if he noticed something was wrong. He quickly ran over with everyone. When they came to Gaochao, everyone saw that the suspension bridge that had entered before had already fallen, and more than half of it fell on the opposite side of the cliff. What? The suspension bridge was cut off. This is over, we are going to be trapped in it. Kakutani's face was sad, as if the end of the world was coming. Among the girls, Sonoko's courage can be said to be relatively small. She stepped back in fear and said, "How could this happen? It's terrible." On the contrary, Oda, who has always put his hands in his pockets, has always maintained a relatively cool look and said to the crowd, "In my opinion, this bridge should have fallen into disrepair for a long time." Yizan's insight is extraordinary, and he has seen through it at a glance. The suspension bridge here was cut off by someone. He lowered his voice and said, "No, this suspension bridge was cut off by someone." Pointing to the traces of the lock on the suspension bridge next to him, Yizan said, "You see, all of them have been chopped by an axe, so that's why it's like this." When everyone discovered this, the atmosphere became even more solemn, and Takahashi said in horror, "What should I do? That bandage weirdo will definitely come back, then we will all be killed by him. I don't want it so." On the contrary, Oda narrowed his eyes, looked around, and said, "What are you afraid of? Even if he comes, with so many of us here, are we still afraid of him?" Yizan glanced around and found that something was wrong. It was getting darker and darker now. Even if there were so many of them, if the bandaged freak came in again, they wouldn't necessarily have to deal with it. At least they had to pay some price. With a wave of his hand, Yizan said to everyone, "Everyone, be quiet. It's more dangerous here. We should hurry up and go to the villa. As long as tonight is over, we can go down the mountain to find the police tomorrow. I'm afraid we can't even make it through tonight." Takahashi said with a bit of frustration. When he said this, his eyes were full of horror, and he seemed to be frightened. It didn't take long for everyone to leave here and return to the villa. This night, it was destined to be a little uneasy. That sense of fear shrouded everyone's heart. A gust of wind blew. Yizan and the others in the villa could hear the glass, shaking constantly. Crash! It was at this time that the rain in the sky began to rush, and there were more shadows on everyone's hearts out of thin air. Seemingly feeling a little embarrassed in the atmosphere, Oda clapped his hands, and then said to the crowd, "Okay, let's not think about this matter. We close the windows and doors, then take a good night's sleep and wait. After that, just pretend nothing happened, okay?" Just as he finished speaking, Kakutani's face changed and he lowered his voice and said, "Oda, how can you talk like this, knowing that Yoshiko is our good friend?" Not only did Oda not restrain himself, but he raised his eyelids and said with some displeasure, "She is your best friend, right? I can't stand up to this great writer." Kakutani looked a little angry, his face was ashen, his fists clenched slightly, and he felt a little impulsive. "Okay, let's stop arguing." Sonoko's sister hurriedly stood between the two of them to prevent them from making a move. Humph! After a cold snort, the two walked upstairs, as if there was some kind of grievance between them. Chapter 108-Sleep with Shaoran. Oh, the two of them are they have been arguing about Yoshiko all the time. Chubby Takahashi, sitting on the sofa, playing with his fingers, said absent-mindedly. The speaker had no intention, but the listener was intentional. As soon as Yizan heard this, he felt something was wrong and quickly asked, "Takahashi, you said that the two of them wanted to know Yoshiko, what the hell is going on?" From a detective's point of view, now that Yoshiko is dead, anyone who has had a relationship with her has a major suspicion, and can even be characterized as a suspect. Takahashi glanced at Sonoko's sister and asked in a questioning tone, "Can you talk?" "Yeah." Sonoko's sister nodded and said, "Let me tell you. Regarding the matter of 8 trigrams, both men and women have such talents." Shaolin and Yuanzi hurriedly sat down and waited for their sister to break the news. Sonoko's sister sighed slightly, and then began to say, "When they were in college, Oda and Kakutani both liked Yoshiko, but later, Yoshiko and Kakutani got together. Oda was very disappointed, so he would often there was an argument with Oda, but Oda was very patient and never argued with Oda, but today, he may not be in a good mood." "So it is." E370 nodded on the surface, but in his heart it was as if a shocking wave was set off. This was simply a big piece of information. If this is the case, the death of Yoshiko and these two men are likely to have an inseparable relationship. After all, they were once Yoshiko's suitors. If Yizan's hypothesis is true, he thinks the most suspicious person should be Oda. When he was there, he showed indifference to Yoshiko, and his attitude towards Yoshiko after his death is very likely to be his revenge. There is a kind of person who is like this. If he can't get something, others don't want it. He would rather destroy it than let others have it. Perhaps Oda has such a thought. But now Yizan couldn't come up with evidence, and it was not easy to suspect anything, so he had to bury this doubt in his heart for the time being. Dong, dong, dong. At this time, the pendulum clock in the room rang slightly, showing the time. It was already 9 o'clock in the evening. Slightly glanced at the pendulum clock, Yizan said to the others, "It's getting late, so let's rest early." Well, everyone was a little sleepy, and soon they all went upstairs and returned to their rooms, ready to rest for the night. Knowing that Yoshiko was dead, no one dared to sleep in her room, so Yizan still slept in the same room with Shaolin, and the others kept their original arrangements. After entering the room with Shaolin, Yizan backhanded the door and said to Shaolin, "Why is there only one bed, then what should I do?" "The huge bedroom, there is only one bed in it, and it is still very soft. If you do some exercise on it, it will be very refreshing." Shaolin walked over to the bed, picked up a quilt, and said to Yizan, "It doesn't matter, then I'll sleep on the ground, and I'll let you sleep on the bed, anyway, it's just one night." She originally thought that Xiaolin would want to sleep with her, but she made this decision. Yizan was so excited before that he suddenly fell to the bottom. Of course, Yizan, who has always been a good man, could let Xiaolan sleep on the ground. He took the quilt from Xiaolan's hand and whispered, "I'll sleep here." "Okay, then it's hard for you, Yizan." Xiaolan suddenly stretched out her hand, showing a very cute smile, her eyes blinking a few times with a smile. Seeing Xiaolan like this, Yizan was speechless for a while in his heart. It seemed that he had miscalculated and fell for her. The girl's mind was really unpredictable. After all, it's been a busy day, and everyone is sleepy. After Yizan laid the quilt, he went up first, then said good night to Xiaolan who was sleeping on the bed, and was ready to go to sleep. "Good night." Xiaolan also smiled slightly. After turning off the light, she pulled up her quilt and lay down on the soft pillow. On the surface, Yizan closed his eyes, but he couldn't calm down inside. He was waiting for an opportunity, and when Xiaolan fell asleep, he climbed up quietly. But after waiting for a while, Xiaolan not only did not fall asleep, but sat up from the bed, glanced at the ground nervously, and said to Yizan, "Yizan, why don't we sleep together, what do you think?" While talking, Xiaolan got up by herself, picked up a quilt, got off the bed, came to Yizan's floor, and lay down with him, but she covered her own quilt. Unexpectedly, Xiaolan is still a person who does what he says and does not need to discuss with others. Yizan also said in surprise, "You came to sleep with me, it is not because you are afraid." Being poked in his mind, Xiaolington felt a little embarrassed, waved his hand, and said with a smile, "How could it be? I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, if the bandage freak dares to come, I can kick him with one kick. Fly." Ha ha. Yizan smiled without saying a word, but said in his heart, "If it's so powerful, why did the face change when I was in the woods just now?" Perhaps seeing Yizan's disdain, Xiaolan didn't forget to justify herself. "Actually, I was afraid that you would be cold by yourself, so I came here to warm up together." This sentence only stimulated Yizan, and his face changed instantly. A pair of eyes kept looking at Xiaolan, and he thought to himself, "If you want warmth, I can give it to you later." Warmer. Quote. While the two were talking, Yizan pulled the quilt a little bit closer, and he and Xiaolan were about to face each other, and then said, "Xiaolan, come closer, isn't it warmer?" "It seems so." At this time, Xiaolan couldn't refute Yizan, otherwise what she said before would become a lie. Chapter 109-Night Attack. Hee. Yizan smiled secretly, and slowly stretched out his hand, ready to touch Xiaolan's body a few times. Although some unpleasant things happened tonight, it did not affect Yizan's capture of Xiaolan. Bang dang. Suddenly, at this moment, there was a loud noise from outside the window. The black window on the first floor suddenly burst open, and a burly black figure jumped in. The moment the shadow appeared, Yizan and Xiaolan both looked over, just to see this person clearly from beginning to end. It was none other than the bandaged weirdo. The burly man with bandages, after breaking through the window, jumped onto the bed without any hesitation, especially in his hand, holding a gleaming axe, he slashed hard at the head of the bed. "Go down, Tilda." It's just that after he chopped off the first axe, he realized that something was wrong. The axe didn't hit anyone. Instead, he chopped the bedside cabinet in half in one fell swoop. Whoa! At once, the bedside table was scattered and fell on the ground everywhere. Ah! Although Xiaolan and Yizan both slept on the floor, when the bandaged freak came in, she saw it clearly and was startled. She couldn't help screaming. If he was on the bed, he would probably have his head cut off, just like Kai Yoshiko. The bandage weirdo, who had realized that something was wrong, did not stay in the room, turned around quickly, and wanted to continue running out of the window. This fuck. Unexpectedly, the bandage monster would appear at this time, and Yizan's anger rushed up. He originally thought that he could capture Xiaolan, but he was disturbed by this guy. "Damn guy, do you want to leave like this? There is no door." Yizan jumped up from the ground as soon as he shouted angrily, and flew into the air, targeting the bandaged weirdo. Ah! The bandaged freak screamed and was kicked in the back by Yizan. The whole person actually flew up, and then flew out of the window, hitting the ground heavily. After receiving this kick, the bandaged freak stood up immediately, didn't even dare to turn his head back, and ran to the distance, much faster than before. Yizan originally wanted to chase out, but worried about Shaolin again, and then he thought about it, as if he had remembered something. If everyone was sleeping at this time, then the bandage freak wouldn't be anyone in the villa, but if anyone wasn't there, the result would be self-evident. As soon as he figured this out, Yizan didn't hesitate at all. He quickly turned on the light, and said to Shaolan, "Hurry up and call everyone else up and tell them that the bandage monster has appeared again." Okay. Shaolin was also terrified this time. She didn't expect the bandaged monster to be so terrifying, and she still dared to run into their room. The two hurried out of the room and knocked on everyone's door one by one, telling everyone to come out quickly. In fact, when Shaolin screamed just now, many people had already woken up. They quickly opened the door, and then opened the door. Yuanzi was wearing pajamas, but her expression was tense. She took Shaolin's hand and said, "What happened just now? I heard your cry." "Bandage weirdo, he's here again," Shaolan said in shock. "What?" But after she finished speaking, Yuanzi seemed to be even more frightened than Shaolin, so she hurriedly leaned beside Shaolin, and looked around in horror with her eyes. At this time, Yizan was also going to call others, but when passing by Yoshiko's room, he suddenly found that the door was open, and his eyes immediately stopped there. He clearly remembered that when he and Shaolin returned to the room together, they passed by here. The door was tightly closed, but it was opened now. Afterwards, Yizan's eyes looked outside the doors of the next rooms. The only ones who haven't come out yet are Takahashi, Oda, and Kakutani. This made Yizan wonder in his heart that maybe he killed Yoshiko. The real murderer was among the three of them. Knowing that the time was short, Yizan hurriedly knocked on the door of the three people. He wanted to see if anyone was not in this room, or refused to open the door for a long time. Soon, Oda and Kakutani, who were knocked on the door, opened the door, but Takahashi, opposite Yoshiko's room, never came out, but the door was locked. After discovering this, Yizan's brows instantly wrinkled. He quickly walked to the door, and said to Takahashi in the room, "Takahashi, what's wrong with you? Did something happen?" "My door lock is broken, the door can't be opened at all," Takahashi said very anxiously in the room, with some panic in his tone. Yizan narrowed his eyes and snorted coldly in his heart. "Is this what you covered up after you killed someone? In that case, wait inside and I'll kick the door open," Yizan said quickly. Then, without waiting for Takahashi in the room to speak, Yizan suddenly raised his right leg, condensed a huge force at his feet, and kicked out with a ruthless kick. With a sound of bang, the door of the room was kicked open in an instant, and the door lock was directly destroyed, bursting to the side. Takahashi was standing right next to the gate. He was shocked by this kick and stepped back a long way. He took a few steps back and finally sat down on the bed. Takahashi, who was sitting on the bed, kept rubbing his buttocks and complained, "Why don't you give me time to prepare? Fortunately there is a bed behind." After entering Gaochao's room, Yizan looked at everything in the room with a quick glance, but soon found that everything was normal and Gaochao was not surprised. Could it be that I guessed wrong? Yizan frowned, and some doubts arose in his heart. However, when he looked at the ground and found the door lock on the ground, his eyes changed immediately. From his experience, this door lock was manipulated, so that's why it was like this. In addition to the previous doubts, Yizan's eyes suddenly changed. He could be sure that the murderer who killed Yoshiko was in this villa, and he was one of them. Chapter 110 Everyone is there. HMPH, he really is a murderer who can cover up. Yizan snorted coldly in his heart, the corners of his mouth raised slightly, because he felt that this game was getting more and more fun. Seeing that Takahashi was still touching his butt, Yizan quickly walked over with a smile, helped him up from the bed, and said with a smile, "I'm sorry, I'm also worried about you. I'm afraid you might be in danger inside. I was really scared in the room just now, so I won't blame you. Takahashi showed a relatively simple and honest smile. Soon, Yi-zan said, let's go out first. The bandaged freak came to attack Shaolin just now. What? The bandage weirdo has appeared again. Takahashi's face instantly became very frightened, and he seemed to have a deep fear of the bandage weirdo. The reason why Yi-zan said this was to see how Takahashi would react. Through his emotional expression, he might be able to guess whether he was a bandage weirdo or not. Now Yi-zan has been able to confirm that the bandage monster who killed Yoshiko was in this villa, but he just couldn't produce strong evidence. Once he found evidence, he would immediately make the bandage monster act. Soon, Yi-zan and Takahashi walked out of his room together, and everyone was waiting outside. When he saw Yi-zan, Zhaogu's expression was also very bad, and he quickly said, how did the bandage freak come in? Are you hurt? Yi-zan shook his head slightly, and then said to the crowd, ignore the rest, let's go downstairs and talk about it. It's not very safe here. Maybe the bandage weirdo will appear at any time. Okay. Everyone agreed with this matter, so they followed Yi-zan to the first floor. When everyone came to the restaurant, Yi-zan said, you may want to know, who is that bandage weirdo? As soon as these words came out, everyone in the restaurant turned their attention to Yi-zan, because they all felt that there was a magic power on Yi-zan's body that could guide everyone. But Oda, who has always been arrogant, seemed a little dissatisfied with Yi-zan's imposing manner and felt a little dissatisfied, and quickly stood up and said, it doesn't matter who the bandage freak is, we'll stay together tonight, compared to the bandage freak. Don't dare to show up. As long as you find the police early tomorrow morning, you will be able to get to the bottom at that time. Yi-zan glanced at Oda coldly, and said lightly, why are you so nervous? Could it be that you are the so-called bandage freak? You, what are you talking about? Oda's temper was still a little irritable, and when Yi-zan said that, he immediately became unhappy, and hurriedly retorted, how could I be some kind of bandage freak? You are talking nonsense. Ha ha. Yi-zan just smiled and didn't say much. On the other hand, Yuanzi, who was already scared and didn't know what to do, stood close to Shaolin, and said with some dissatisfaction, what are you all doing? It's making people sick. Bata. At this moment, the lights in the dining room suddenly went out, and the whole room fell into darkness in an instant. Ah, darkness is the most frightening thing, especially as girls. Shaolin and Sonoko have been screaming in terror. After a while, the two stopped screaming. Sonoko's sister was relatively calm. She tried her best to keep her tone steady, and said to everyone present, don't be nervous, I'll go get some candles. I'll accompany you. Shaolin's voice also sounded in the dark night. She was more afraid of the dark and wanted to see the light as soon as possible. When Shaolin and Yuanzi's sister got up to go to the kitchen, Yi-zan also quietly stood up and followed behind them, because he knew that the bandaged weirdo seemed to have a prejudice against Shaolin and wanted her life the most. She must be protected. Soon, Sonoko's sister found a candle in the kitchen and lit it with a lighter. Although the candle light was not very strong, it was enough to illuminate the surroundings. Come on, I still have some candles here, let's light them all, they should be able to last for a while. Sonoko's sister quickly took out other candles. After all the candles were lit, Shaolin and Sonoko's sister, each with a few candles in their hands, walked over slowly, and the surrounding areas of the corridor were also lit up. But what they didn't notice was that, right behind, Yi-zan followed closely, not saying a word, not even making a sound, as if he didn't exist. Bang dang. In the dark night, there was a violent shattering sound, as if something had been smashed fiercely. Shoo! Soon, with the sound of breaking, a cold white light flashed across the corridor, with a fierce murderous aura, slashing towards Shaolin's side. This axe that glowed with cold light was full of murderous aura, and the sharp blade shone with terrifying light. Hey! At the moment when the axe was about to fall, Yi-zan also moved, rushed forward quickly, and kicked Fei, directly hitting the handle of the axe, pushing the axe directly from the middle. Kicked off. Moreover, at the moment when the axe was kicked off, Yizan quickly turned around and kicked, and in the faint light, he kicked the bandaged monster. PFF'd. The bandaged geek was kicked in the lower abdomen, spit out 3.5 mouthfuls of blood, and then quickly fled back. When passing by Shaolin and Yuanzi's sister, he directly extinguished the candles in their hands. Suddenly, the whole room fell into darkness again, and the bandaged weirdo didn't know where to go. Crackling. Not long after, the lights in the room flashed a few times quickly, and all the lights came on again. At this time, Yizan and the others looked at each other, wanting to see what happened just now. But Yizan was looking for whether there were any people in the room just now, maybe someone was missing just now, but after looking around, he found that everyone was in the restaurant, except for him and Sister Yuanzi, Shaolansan people in the living room. Chapter 111 _ The murderer is Kakutani. Yuanzi's sister also patted her chest a little scared, and said quickly, "It's really scary, if it wasn't for Yizan just now, we would all be in danger." "Shaolan, are you alright?" Sonoko's sister asked quickly. "I'm fine." Shaolan shook her head. Suddenly, Oda seemed to have discovered something, pointed to the window of the balcony on the second floor, and said to everyone, "Look, the window there is broken." Huh. Yizan followed what Oda was pointing at, looked over quickly, and then ran up the stairs first, wanting to see what was going on. The others followed closely, and ran to the balcony on the second floor with Yizan, looked there for a while, and saw that the originally closed window had been shattered at this time, and there were still a lot of them. The glass slag fell into the room. After seeing the broken glass, Oda couldn't help but said, "It seems that the bandaged weirdo just smashed the glass and broke in from the outside." "Yeah, it's really scary." Takahashi also echoed beside him. The expression on his face was always so frightened, he looked terrified. But at this moment, Yizan noticed something was wrong. He looked at the ground and happened to see that although the whole glass window was broken, there was a very strange situation. The plug under the glass window was opened. Just this doubt made Yizan's eyes become more solemn. If it really broke in from the outside, the plug of the glass window could not have been opened. In this case, there is only one possibility, the bandage weirdo. They went out from the room first, and then smashed the glass window on the balcony. So it is. The corner of Yizan's mouth lifted slightly. At this point, he was basically certain that this was a long-planned murder case, and the perpetrators were among them. Right now, Yizan's job is to find a suitable opportunity to expose him. However, how did he kill Yoshiko? Yizan still had the biggest doubt in his mind. If he couldn't solve it, it would be difficult for him to infer the real murderer. Standing on the top of the balcony, Yizan glanced down and happened to see that there was a large window in the bathroom on the first floor, where an adult could climb in and out. Ding! At this moment, there seemed to be a knocking sound in Yizan's mind, and all his doubts were solved at this moment. I know his method of committing the crime. Yizan's mouth raised a sneer, and he couldn't help thinking in his heart, the method is quite clever, but it's a pity that he wanted to kill Shaolin and me. Quote. Quickly closing the doors and windows, Yizan said to everyone, "We should all go down there. I have something important to tell everyone." All the people present were stunned, wondering what kind of key Yizan was selling. But since Yizan had said so, the others had nothing to say, and they all followed Yizan's orders and came to the restaurant downstairs. After everyone came down, Yizan took a look at everyone, and finally said indifferently, "The murderer is among us. Are you coming out on your own, or do you want me to testify?" What? As soon as these words came out, everyone's expressions changed dramatically, and some even couldn't believe what Yizan said. The guy who killed Yoshiko and wanted to kill Shaolan was right among them. "Hey, don't talk nonsense, let's panic even more," Oda said with courage. In fact, he was already very scared, and his eyes kept looking around. However, in the eyes of everyone at this time, Oda liked to refute Yizan's words the most, and he was very indifferent to Yoshiko's death. Could it be Oda? Being watched by everyone, Oda was also very dissatisfied, and quickly said, why are you all looking at me like this? I'm not a murderer. Although no one said he was, but looking at his eyes, there are serious doubts. At this moment, Yi-zan stood up, waved his finger lightly, and then shook his head and said, you all guessed wrong. It wasn't Oda who really killed Yoshiko, but someone else. Huh. Oda breathed a sigh of relief, then said to the crowd, I'll just say it's not me, you all look at me like that. Afterwards, Oda hurriedly said to Yi-zan, since you already know who the murderer is, tell us quickly, where is he? Yi-zan's eyes suddenly became cold, he looked to his right, and then lowered his voice. Mr. Kakutani, can you tell us why you killed your beloved Yoshiko? Ah, this. Kakutani's face instantly became very ugly, and his body couldn't help but take a few steps back. But then, Kakutani's face became gloomy again, and he said to Yi-zan, you brat, don't talk nonsense here, obviously it was a bandage freak who killed Yoshiko, but you have to say it was me, what's the matter? Evidence. If you want evidence, I can give it to you. Yi-zan snorted coldly, without any hesitation, he took a quick step forward, came directly to Zhaogu's side, and ripped off his clothes. Yi-zan's movements were very fast, and Kakutani had almost no chance to dodge. The brown coat on his body was torn off, and even the t-shirt inside him. Ah, the girls present never thought that Yi-zan would take off Zhaogu's clothes in front of everyone. However, after Kakutani's shirt was taken off, he showed his whole body in front of everyone's eyes. To everyone's surprise, he actually had several scars on his body, and they were all just done. The bruise has not yet dissipated. Tell me, explain to everyone why you have so many new injuries on your body. Yi-zan said coldly, his tone suddenly turned cold. I didn't expect Yi-zan to suddenly make this move. Zhaogu was not prepared at all. Now that Yi-zan has discovered this, Zhaogu said vaguely, this is me, just now, I accidentally fell and was injured. Of. Chapter 112-knockdown. Kakutani's words were a little vague, and the expression and tone of his words changed a bit, which made people see that something was wrong. Da. After tapping on the table a few times, Yi-zan lowered his eyes slightly, squinted his eyes to look at Zhaogu, and said to him, if you are injured, then I will ask you why your scars, there will be another footprint. I saw that there was a purple patch on Kakutani's abdomen, obviously it was kicked by someone, and it was already a little swollen. How could this be, Kakutani? After seeing the scars on his body, everyone showed an extremely surprised look, and almost couldn't believe that Kakutani, who knew Yoshiko's lover, would kill his sweetheart. Things have come to this stage, and Kakutani also knows that no matter what he says, it is impossible to restore everything. But Kakutani, who was a little scared, still wanted to be a living horse doctor. He bit Kiba, stared at Yi-zan and said, I'm with everyone, how could I have time to kill Yoshiko? Yi-zan sneered, and then said, I'm afraid you have planned all of this. Although you spend most of your time with us, you only know that when Yoshiko died, you happened to be there. Go to the toilet, go through the window of the bathroom, you climb out like this, then go to the second floor, kill Yoshiko, then use a dummy, hang it on the windowsill, let the dummy hug Yoshiko's head, swiped in front of the window, just to let us see clearly, right? This passage was sonorous and powerful, and everyone's expressions changed dramatically. Taking a few steps back, Kakutani sat down on the sofa, grabbed his hair with both hands, and said very annoyed, yes, that's right, I killed Yoshiko, it's all mine. Wrong, woohoo. A tall, seemingly burly man like Kakutani, in this one, finally couldn't hold back the sadness and couldn't help crying. After sobbing for a while, Kakutani raised his head, looked at everyone again, and said, I'm sorry, I lied to you. In fact, Yoshiko broke up with me a month ago. This news is undoubtedly more like a blockbuster, which makes everyone's emotions become surprised again. Yi-zan looked at him very calmly, and then said, I'm afraid this is your real purpose of killing Yoshiko. The truth has been revealed, and Kakutani has nothing to hide, but now he feels a little relieved, sighs slightly, shows a bitter smile, and then says, "This all started a long time ago." Speaking of. After knowing that Yoshiko became a well-known screenwriter, she began to gradually become cold to me. She came into contact with the circle of the upper class and no longer took me seriously. Sometimes she often dated some handsome celebrities. For these things, I also quarreled with her, but at the back, the only exchange was to be ruthlessly abandoned by her. I was not reconciled. I began to pursue her since college and obeyed her, but I never thought that the final result would be so. After listening to what Kakutani said, everyone's expressions became a little unnatural. It was indeed a big blow for such a thing to happen. What's more, their relationship is still so deep. After losing each other, it will inevitably become crazy. So, after knowing that Yoshiko is dead, I plan to go with her together. Kakutani suddenly became cold, took out a sharp dagger from his body and aimed it at his neck, as if he was about to stab him. The people around were afraid that something would happen to him, so they rushed to his side, ready to stop him. "Kakutani, don't want to think about it, do something stupid." But Kakutani said with a sad face, "I have no meaning to live anymore, it's all my fault." He, if he wants to die, let him die. Suddenly, Yi-zan, who was standing beside him, said in a cold tone, as if he didn't care about Jiaogu's life or death at all. As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately looked at Yi-zan in surprise. They didn't expect him to be such an inhuman guy who didn't pay so much attention to the lives of others. However, Yi-zan soon said again, "If you really want to die, then do it. Now you are just an ugly murderer king. In order to cover up your crimes, you started to attack the villains in the villa. Are people ready to kill us all and then run away?" What? This sentence, like a thunderbolt from the blue, shocked everyone, and they all retreated back, feeling a little afraid of Kakutani. Seemingly exposed by Yi-zan, Jiaogu finally became angry at this time. He laughed. "Haha, what a pity, my original perfect plan, there will be no problem, who is asking you? It's abominable to come and destroy everything for me." Yeah. After speaking, Kakutani roared angrily, clenched the dagger in his hand, swung forward, and stabbed at the people around him, showing no mercy, as if he wanted to stab everyone to death. Fortunately, everyone had some precautions long ago, so they all ran away and avoided his attack. However, Kakutani, who was already a little crazy, didn't care about anything, picked up the dagger in his hand, and rushed towards Shaolin, as if he had a special paranoia towards Shaolin, and he was going to kill her. When Yi-zan was about to make a move, Yi-zan did not expect that when Shaolin was on guard, she was actually a violent woman who could overthrow a big man. Thinking about it, she was also a black belt expert, so Jiaogu hadn't rushed to Shaolin's side. Lan Fei kicked. Although the power of this foot is not very large, it is very accurate. It hit Kakutani's abdomen in one stroke, leaving a trace on his soft ribs, causing him to scream in pain and retreat back continuously. At this time, Yi-zan also moved. As soon as he stepped on the ground with his right foot, he jumped up instantly, kicked his body, and hit Jiaogu's wrist directly, kicking his dagger into the air. Out. Chapter 113 Thing. With Jiaogu's strength, how could it be Yi-zan's opponent? After 3 strikes and 5 divisions, Yi-zan knocked Jiaogu to the ground, unable to get up even if he wanted to. Soon, Yi-zan asked Oda to find a rope and tied Kakutani so that he could not move, and finally subdued him. After some tossing, a ray of sunshine rose in the forest, and the earth that had been silent for a night finally brightened up. The sun shines through the windowsill and shines on the villa, and it also shines on everyone's faces. Everyone's expressions are also different. "Go down the mountain and hand over Kakutani to the police," Yi-zan said indifferently. "There is nothing to be pitied about this kind of murderous madman." Everyone nodded. According to Yi-zan's arrangement, they took Jiaogu down the mountain together. When they reached the foot of the mountain, Yi-zan's mobile phone signal was restored, and he quickly called the police. Ula, ula, with the sound of a siren, Kakutani was taken into a police car, and everyone saw his gloomy face, full of remorse. Seeing Yizan and the others as well, Zhaogu turned his head and gave them a very bleak smile, and then said, I hope we will meet again one day, goodbye. Ah, it's better not to see him again. Yi 547 Zan's mouth moved, but he didn't want to see him again for this murderous madman. After arriving at the foot of the mountain, Yizan drove back with Shaolin and Yuanzi, and the others also had their own cars, so they parted ways at the foot of the mountain. Not long after, Yizan used his pervert's reaction speed to forcefully drive into the downtown area. However, the face of Shaolin in the car was not very good. When did you learn to race? It scared me to death. Yizan spread his hands, but he didn't have any regrets about it. He smiled slightly and said, well, in order to make up for my shock to you, I'll take you to eat something good. As soon as he heard that there was something good to eat, Yuanzi immediately said happily, okay, let's go eat. Shaolin also said to Yizan, since you said that, then I will forgive you. Ding ding ding. At this moment, Shaolan's cell phone rang. Hello. Shaolin picked up the phone and answered it immediately. After nodding for a long time, she turned her head and said to Yizan, Yizan, my father called, it seems that I can't eat with you. Eat with the garden. Seeing this, Yizan waved his hand. Then I'll take you back. Yuanzi's body still needs to be recuperated, then I'll cook a meal for Yuanzi. Yizan said and took Shaolin to the Maori detective agency. Not long after, Yizan brought the two girls to the detective agency. Maori stuck his head out from the window and shouted happily, you are finally back, I have been waiting for you for a long time. Dad. Shaolin stretched out her hand, said hello to Maori, and then walked up the stairs with Yizan carrying Li. Opening the door of the Maori detective agency, Yizan immediately felt a very unpleasant smell. He looked inside and saw that in the whole room, those things were all messed up and placed randomly, all of which were Maori food for 2 days. Seeing these things, Yizan couldn't help frowning. Maoli was too sloppy, no wonder Fei Yingli left him. Dad, why are you so messed up? Shaolin complained, and after entering the room, she started to pack up. Seeing Yizan standing at the door, Maori quickly pulled him in, opened 2 bottles of beer, handed one to Yizan, and said with a smile, how did you two go to play this time? It seems to be very good. Oh. It's okay. Yizan nodded slightly, picked up the beer and took a sip, but his eyes were fixed on Shaolan's body. If it wasn't for the bandage weirdo last night, it would have been with Shaolan by now. Oh, what a waste of a great opportunity. Maori seemed a little dizzy after drinking, and when he spoke, he seemed a little incoherent. Yizan was a little speechless in his heart. Is this still the attitude a father should have? For his daughter, he can't wait to sell her. In order to cope with what Maoli said, Yizan had to discuss this topic with him by the side, and finally it developed into Maoli talking about his own love history, leaving Yizan speechless for a while. After Shaolin had packed everything up, Maori insisted on taking Yizan to have a meal at home. Yizan, who could not refuse, had to agree to the request. After Shaolin cleaned up, the whole room became very clean. Yizan looked at the delicious food, and his appetite increased. After eating, Yizan went shopping with Shaolin again, and then returned to his villa, ready to take a good rest. Last night, because of the weird bandage incident, it affected his rest. Sonoko, let's do something we love. As Yizan said, the whole atmosphere seemed extremely turbulent. That's how the night was spent. In the early morning, when Yi Xuanzheng was sleeping beautifully, he was woken up by the phone ringing. Getting up irritably, Yizan couldn't help frowning when he saw the display on his phone. Why would Maori call at this time? But no matter what, Yizan still answered the phone. Hey, what's the matter? On the other end of the phone, Maori was standing at his home with the microphone in his hand. Even though he was answering the phone, he still showed an excited expression, scratched his hair, and said, that's right, I'm a little bit here. Can you come over and do me a favor? What's the matter? Yizan said indifferently. He had a hunch that it wouldn't be a good thing for Maori to find him. Hey. Maori smiled slightly on the other end of the phone, and then said, that's right, come here first, and I'll tell you later. Although he was very unhappy with Maori's attitude, he was woken up when he woke up, and he probably wouldn't be able to fall asleep again, so Yi-zan agreed. Chapter 114 Kiba. Not long after, Yi-zan came to the detective agency. Tell me, come here so late, what do you need me to help with? When he said this, Yi-zan's eyes kept looking around the room, trying to find the trace of Shaolin. However, Yi-zan didn't see Shaolin. Instead, behind Maori, he saw a 7 or 8-year-old girl, who was very cute, with short hair, and a baby face that was very tender, as if she could squeeze out water if she squeezed hard. Come the same. Who is she? Yi-zan couldn't help asking. Maori smiled slightly and said, that's right, she's my friend's daughter, because her parents left the child with me before they got off work, but she's going to leave at 6:30. The hospital pulled Kiba and I needed to take her there. However, I have another ticket for Miss Yoko's concert in my hand. I have to go to see it immediately. If I miss it, it will be a pity. So I just... Although Maoli didn't finish the rest, but with Yi-zan's IQ, he could fully understand what he was going to say next. What's more, Maoli was still a little unclear. You want me to take her to the hospital to extract Kiba? Yi-zan said with a dangerous look in his eyes, looking at Maori Kogoro. Oh, Yi-zan, you are so smart, you really deserve to be a superstar in the detective world. Maoli was not stingy with his praise, and praised Yi-zan from head to toe. UTMD just for this, tell me to, get up. With Yi-zan's roar, the whole detective agency rang out. After a while, Yi Shuenkai left the Maori detective agency with the little girl who was looking at him with a terrified face. Behind him, Maori Kogoro stuck out his head with a scarred face and said to the little girl, Ayumi, this big brother will take you to pull out Kiba. Uncle, I still have important things to do, so I won't accompany you. Quote. Ayumi. Yi-zan, who was about to leave, paused. It turned out that this little girl was Ayumi. In the original book, she was Conan's good friend. Seeing Bu-mei with a delicate oval face, Yi-zan couldn't help showing a smile at the corners of his mouth. When this little girl grows up, she must be a rare beauty embryo. Do you want to play the game of cultivation? Not long after leaving the Maori detective agency, Yi-zan glanced at the time and found that it was past 5 o'clock, and it was time to leave and take Ayumi to find Dr. Kiba. A slight smile, Yi-zan said, Ayumi, where is the Kiba doctor you mentioned, do you know? Yeah, the young Ayumi nodded, took out a written note from her pocket, and handed it to Yi-zan. Zushin Road, Chiba Kiba Medical Center. Yi-zan read the address, and then said to Ayumi, well, the time you wrote on it is 6:30, I have to take you there quickly, we will be there now. Let's go. Okay, big brother. Ayumi was a well-behaved and obedient girl, of course she would not have any other opinions on Yi-zan's arrangement. Soon, Yi-zan took Ayumi's little hand, walked down from the Maori detective office, and came to the place where he parked. After seeing Yi-zan's car, Ayumi couldn't help but be slightly surprised. Wow, brother Yi-zan, your car is so cool. Slight smile, Yi-zan said, you are still so young, you know what cool means. That's what they say on TV, so cool. Ayumi also learned the tone of the stars on the TV, and told Yi-zan again. Ha ha, Yi-zan smiled, stroked Bu-mei's hair lightly, took her to his sports car, and drove over directly according to the address given on her note. After about half an hour, Yi-zan drove the car to Zushin Road and found Chiba Kiba Medical Center. After all, the traffic in this city is still a bit congested, and it takes time to get to another place from another place. Yi-zan parked the car outside, held Ayumi's hand, and walked into the Kiba Medical Center. Chiba Kiba Medical Center is already written in big characters, and it is still in a prominent position on this street, so it is relatively easy to find. When Yi-zan came in, he found that although the medical hall was not very big, as soon as he entered, he could feel a warm feeling, which showed that the owner of this medical hall still loved it very much. Is there anyone? Yi-zan shouted directly when he came to the medical hall. After all, he didn't see anyone inside. Come on. Soon, a woman's voice came from the medical hall. Then, from the bathroom inside the medical hall, a young woman with long hair and a long gown came out. Her long white legs were exposed. Moreover, this woman also looks good, belongs to the kind of beautiful and generous feeling, so Yizan couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. After the woman walked out, she walked directly to Yizan's side and happily greeted Ayumi. Did your uncle bring you here? Afterwards, the woman stretched out her hand to Yizan and said with a smile, Hello, I'm Kiba doctor from Ayumi. Today, I specially asked her to come and pull Kiba. My name is Chiba. Chiba, what a good name. Yizan smiled lightly, stretched out his hand, and held it with Ayumi, then said, I'm not Ayumi's uncle, but someone asked me to bring her here. After hearing this, Chiba's face changed a bit, his eyes were more vigilant, and then he said to Yizan, So, then I'll just pull out Kiba later and send Ayumi back. Yizan smiled lightly and said, It doesn't matter, I'll just wait outside. No need. Chiba shook his head and said to Yizan, It will take a long time to pull out Kiba, and I and Bumei's family are also neighbors. If I go back later, I can also take her back by the way. After being rejected twice by others, Yizan couldn't say anything else. Maybe people were worried that he might be a bad person. Well, then I'll trouble Miss Chiba. Yizan nodded slightly, then left here first, and said hello to Ayumi. Be good here, be obedient. Chapter 115_Real Estate Businessman Killed. Although I didn't know Ayumi for a long time, this cute and obedient little girl made Yizan can't help but want to get close to her. Soon, Yizan walked out of the Kiba Medical Center, went outside, found his sports car, drove straight to Maori's detective office, and went out with Shaolin while there was still time. When he came to the Maori Detective Institute, it happened that Shaolin was out of class. In order to honor what he had promised Yuanzi before, Yizan made another appointment with Yuanzi. The three found a seafood restaurant together and had a big meal there. It wasn't until after 9 o'clock in the middle of the night that Yizan sent Yuanzi and Shaolin back to their respective homes. Yuanzi kept frowning at Yizan in the car, which made Yizan have some ideas. The garden is out. When he returned to Shaolin's house, Maori didn't know when he came back, and he looked very happy. Yuhi's face was glowing, obviously because he drank a lot of wine. As soon as Yizan and Shaolan came back together, Maori stood up happily and said to Yizan and the others, You know, Miss Yoko invited me to drink with you tonight. I'm still happy, la la la. Quote. In order to express his excitement, Maori also sang happily while dancing. Dad is really drinking so much wine again, Shaolin said with some dissatisfaction. The other hand, Yizan, still remembering what Maori told him before, couldn't help but ask, By the way, how is Ayumi, is she home now? While dancing, Maori said to Yizan, She's already home at 8 o'clock, and her mother has already called me. It's alright, you can rest assured. That's good. Yizan nodded, knowing that everything was fine. After all, he sent Ayumi there just now, so he had to be sure of safety. After saying hello to Shaolin, Yizan was about to return to his home, but when he just walked to the door, Shaolin quickly chased after him. Holding a scarf in Shaolin's hand, she quickly walked to Yizan's side, then handed the scarf to him, and said shyly, Winter is coming soon, this is for you. What? Yizan was stunned for a moment, and some did not react. Speaking of which, it seemed that he had never received a similar gift. After all, his women didn't know their own strength, and this scarf thing is really true. Unnecessary. Fool. Shaolin's face turned slightly Yuhi. She stood on tiptoe, quickly kissed Yizan's face, and then retreated back as fast as she could. After kissing Yizan, Shaolin didn't stop for a moment, turned around quickly, and ran home. Yizan stayed on the spot for a few seconds before shouting, I rub it, Shaolin, don't bother, I haven't tasted it yet, let's do it again. And Shaolin said in a distant voice, Think beautifully. Yizan watched Shaolin leave with a smile on the corner of his mouth, and couldn't help thinking that this little girl would one day conquer her. Thinking of these things, Yizan was still a little elated, hummed a little song all the way, and drove back to his villa. In the evening, after Yizan got in touch with number 18, he shut down the video. Now number 18 is engrossed in the matter of time travel. In the early morning, Yizan and Yuanzi were bored watching TV together. Soon the news on TV made Yizan a little amused. The famous wealthy real estate businessman in the city was poisoned with a needle and died. There is no trace of the crime scene. The murderer is under investigation. When Yizan was thinking about this. Ding ding ding. Yizan's cell phone rang. Yizan picked it up and saw that it was Officer Miu Miu who was calling. As soon as he saw that it was Police Officer Miu Miu's phone, Yizan knew without thinking that there must be a case, and, if Yizan guessed correctly, it should be the case on TV. Hey, Officer Mumu, what's the matter with calling me so early? Yizan took a sip of milk and said indifferently. Officer Miu Miu on the other end of the phone laughed along and said quickly, I'm so sorry, Yizan, I didn't want to trouble you, but you've seen the news, the case was known to the TV station before it was solved. And it was released, so the above asked us to solve the case as soon as possible. I thought, only you can do it, please help me. Quote. Is it the case where a wealthy real estate businessman was killed last night? Yizan asked casually. Yizan is really amazing. That's right, it's this case. Officer Miu Miu said on the phone, this rich businessman has some background, but now he was suddenly killed and exposed, and he has put a lot of pressure on us. If we don't solve the case quickly, it will be very detrimental to us. Yizan didn't say much and nodded and said, okay, I'll be here soon. After getting the address, Yizan didn't say anything more to Officer Mumu, and hurriedly drove his car to the scene of the crime. The deceased was found in one of his temporary residences, in an apartment building. When Yizan arrived, it was surrounded by many police. Seeing Yizan coming, the police not only did not stop him on 4.3, but also sent someone to lead Yizan to Officer Mumu. When they came to the side of Officer Mumu, the bottom of their feet was more than 10 square meters, and they were all planned to be the most direct area of the crime scene. You're finally here, but I've been waiting for so long, Officer Mumu said with some complaints. When Yizan didn't come, he scrutinized it for a long time, but couldn't come up with a good solution. Now the corpses are still in place, they haven't been moved, and the situation at the scene has not been passive. Everything remains the same. Yizan glanced around and found that the deceased was lying on the ground with a relatively thick needle tube on his heart, and the long and thin needles had already submerged into his body. Chapter 116 Solve cases easily. Give me a detailed autopsy report, Yizan said to Mao Li after taking a look at the surrounding environment. Officer Miu Miu, who was in charge of this case, still had this power. After giving a few words to a policeman beside him, the policeman quickly brought a document and handed it all to Yizan. Yizan disassembled the information and read it all carefully. If you don't read it, you don't know. It turns out that the time of the deceased's death was at 7:30 last night, and the fatal cause of death was because of the dead man's chest. That long needle contains a highly poisonous substance, and as long as it gets on it, it will die very ugly. Now a whole piece of such venom has been stabbed into the body of the deceased. If the deceased is to die, it will only be a momentary thing. After reading this autopsy report, Yizan already had a general understanding of the cause of death of the deceased. Brows changed slightly, Yizan looked at the people around him again, and then said to the police officer Mumu, who was the first person to find the body. Regarding this question, the police officer Mu-30 did not hide it, and quickly said to Yizan, it's a doctor from Akiba hospital nearby, whose name is Chiba. She first noticed that the place was a bit noisy, and then brought the property together and opened it. Behind the door, I saw this tragedy. Quote. Chiba. Yizan was a little surprised, but he didn't expect it to be the dead person she found. And now, where is Miss Chiba? Yizan continued to ask. Officer Mumu nodded and said, she recorded her statement last night. Today, because she has to go to work, she went back to work at Kobo Medical Center. Speaking of this, Officer Mu's expression changed again, and then he lowered his voice and said to Yizan, "However, we have found a very suspicious thing, that is, 20 years ago, the deceased and the Kobo doctor, Miss Chiba, had a deep relationship." Huh, Yizan nodded, then said to Officer Mumu, "By the way, speaking of this, Chiba's words, there should be someone watching all this." Officer Mu looked at Yizan suspiciously. "Who?" "I took the daughter of a friend of a Maori detective to Kobo Dr. Chiba to have Kobo extracted. If I count the time, it should be just right." Yizan's words made the police officer Mu look at Yizan in surprise. "Really? Then let's hurry up and find her." Yizan nodded and came to Ayumi's house with Officer Mumu. "Ayumi, are you at home?" "Here." Ayumi's excited voice came from the house, and then Officer Mumu saw Ayumi open the door with a happy face. "Brother Yizan, you're here," Yume said as she looked at Yizan with a smile. "Well," Yizan nodded, picked up Ayumi and came to Ayumi's house with Officer Mumu. "Ayumi, you didn't blame me for leaving yesterday, right?" Yizan sat down, looked at Ayumi, and asked gently. Ayumi shook her head, looked at Yizan and said, "Brother Yizan is here to play with me now." Yizan nodded. "Well, let's play a detective game, shall we?" Yizan's words made Bume's eyes light up instantly, and she looked at Yizan excitedly and said, "Okay, let's play." Yizan heard the words and slowly began to guide Ayumi to describe her previous experience at Chiba Kobo Doctor. This matter made the police officer Mu a little stunned, looked at Yizan strangely, did not understand why Yizan wanted to do this. Obviously it was enough to ask directly. However, what happened next stunned the police officer. "Then I fell asleep, and when I woke up, Masked Rider was nearing the end." Ayumi's words made Officer Mickey stunned. Officer Mu can be absolutely certain that what Ayumi told Yizan had never told the police before, but why? The questioning continued, and it didn't take long for Yizan to confirm one thing, that the murderer in this case was the Kobo Dr. Chiba. However, evidence is needed. After Yizan comforted Ayumi, he went to Kobo Dr. Chiba's house with police officer Mumu. "Everyone please." Chiba looked at Yizan and Officer Mumu, opened the door, and let the two enter the room. "I'm sorry, I just came to disturb you without telling you," Yizan said to Chiba. "It's okay, please sit down." Chiba looked at the elegant Yizan and said to the two of them. Yizan slowly sat in front of Chiba and said, "Although I'm sorry, I have to tell you that I suspect that the murderer of Katsuhiko Nakamoto is you." "It's me." Chiba looked at Yizan suspiciously. "What, are you kidding? I've been pulling Kobo for Ayumi. How could it be possible to kill someone?" Yizan said slowly. "It takes 50 minutes to go from the hospital building to the apartment to killing Nakamoto, so you want to say that you basically don't have time to kill, right?" Chiba looked at Yizan 370 in amazement, and nodded blankly. Yizan looked at Chiba and said, "You are a very polite person, but when you were pulling Kobo for Ayumi, you forcibly drove me away, because if I was there, it would destroy you. An alibi, and the reason why you brought someone to identify the body immediately after returning home is to allow the police to calculate the correct time of death, and for that reason, it is also an alibi." Yizan's words caused a flash of panic in Chiba's eyes, because Chiba found out that what Yizan said was what he did, as if Yizan had been following him the whole way. "What's going on here? According to what you said, how did she kill her?" Officer Mu looked at Yizan and asked. And Yizan answered the question. "The time of killing is the time you guessed, and the time of treatment should also be correct." Yizan's words made the police officer Mu completely confused, looking at Yizan and said, "However, even if you are driving, it will take 50 minutes to complete this matter completely." Yizan looked at the surrounding scene, a smile cracked at the corner of his mouth. "Have you thrown away the TV?" "What?" Chapter 117 _ Take full control of your destiny. Chiba was startled, looked at Yizan and said, What did you say? Yizan said slowly. You should be pretending to be the same as a hospital, right? That's why Bume has an illusion. Ah. Officer Miu Miu looked at Yizan strangely. Chiba also looked at Yizan and said, what you said is very interesting. That's right, this explanation is too far-fetched. Officer Miu Miu looked at Yi Xuandao. Yizan ignored the two of them and said slowly, you used anesthesia to put Ayumi to sleep, and then, at about 7:05, you returned to Yijinggu Street in a car with Ayumi, and at 7:20 around the time, parked the car at the construction site behind, hold Ayumi from the escape stairs and enter the apartment, let Ayumi fall asleep in the guest room you have arranged, and at 7:30, go to the next door, Katsuhiko Nakamoto. Yizan's words made Miu Miu feel like he was listening to a book from heaven, and looked at Yizan in a cute way. Did such a strange thing really happen? Officer Mumu expressed his suspicions. But when Officer Miu Miu was suspicious, Yizan continued, after killing someone, you entered the room and turned up his TV volume to the maximum. Someone in Huorong discovered all this earlier. After all, you created an alibi, the more accurate the time of death, the better it is for you. After that, you go back to the room, call Ayumi, let Ayumi see the TV clip, and finally make Ayumi take sleeping pills and fall asleep in Ayumi. After that, take Ayumi back to the hospital. It is estimated that the time should be around 7:54, and then you call Ayumi again, let her see the trailer of Masked Superman, and everything is perfect. Quote. Yizan's words silenced Chiba. And Yizan continued, originally, all this is perfect. If someone finds the body at this time, then no one will suspect you. Yizan said, looked at Chiba and said, unfortunately, your perfect plan delayed the discovery of the corpse, and after you returned to the apartment, no one could find the corpse. Be the one who finds the corpse. After Yizan said this, he lay thirsty on the sofa and looked at the two of them. Chiba hesitated for a while before saying to Yizan, your story is very interesting, but what about the evidence? I didn't do that at all. Officer Miu Miu also looked at Yizan and said, yeah, such an incredible thing shouldn't be true, right? Officer Miu Miu really couldn't believe that this seemingly simple case had such a bizarre modus operandi. Yizan looked at the police officer Miu Miu, and turned over a Byakugan helplessly. I really don't know how you became a police officer. You and I went to the Ayumi side, you have heard Ayumi's words, why still can't understand what? Yizan said, rubbed his throat, and said to Chiba, if there is evidence, it's not that there is no evidence. Yizan said, pointed to the cards on the table, you may not know, before Ayumi drew Akiba, she once took a card from this deck of cards and kept it on her body as a talisman. Put the poker back in its place. Yizan picked up the cards on the table, so, there should be two identical cards in this deck of cards. Soon, Yizan put two Yuhi Heart A.S on the table. Officer Miu Miu looked at all this in astonishment, widening his eyes in disbelief. At this moment, Officer Mumu felt that he was really like an Alzheimer's. On one side, he was an elite criminal member, and on the other side, he was a detective whose IQ was simply not human. As a policeman, he was like a pig. Evidence was conclusive, Chiba could only confess his guilt, and watching Officer Mumu take Chiba away, Yizan sighed softly, only to feel that the sky net was wide and sloppy. This is fate. Yizan sighed again, his understanding of destiny was raised to the limit at this moment. Suddenly, a picture flashed in his mind, his eyes widened in amazement, and the whole person froze in place. In the picture, Conan, who was detained by his own men, tried to escape. Conan is really smart. He managed to escape from the prison after passing through many barriers, but what shocked him the most was that when Conan managed to escape and rushed onto a road, he was hit and killed by a big truck. Conan is dead. The endless power of destiny poured into my mind. When Conan died, Yizan controlled the destiny of the whole world. So it is. So it is. Yizan kept repeating. It turned out that this was fate. He had always thought that he had deprived Conan of the protagonist's aura, but now he knows that at the moment when Conan died, he really deprived him. He got the halo of Conan's protagonist, and he obtained the power of destiny of the whole world in a way of almost plundering. Xiaolan's fate line, Fei Yingri's fate line, Officer Mumu's fate line. Ji Yunan kept looking at the fate line. The women he liked, such as Xiaolan, Sonoko, including Fei Yingri, their fate lines were automatically connected to him, and the fate line of Maori Kogoro was also broken at this moment, turning into a vast universe. A member of the Sea of People, from then on like a stranger. It turns out that this is the power to control fate. A year later, Xiaolan, Yuanzi, Fei Yingli, Belmod, Xiaoai and other women became Yizan's women, and the Black Organization, because of an accident during the research, had a big explosion, and the entire organization was wiped out. This is the power of destiny, just fiddling with the fate line can change everything. Outside the luxurious villa in the Dragon Ball world, Yizan looked satisfied. In 1 year, he finally mastered the power of primary destiny. Yizan returned to the Dragon Ball world. He brought the women of number 18 and Conan world back to the Dragon Ball world, and brought the wives of Hokage and Pirate world to the Dragon Ball world. The Dragon Ball world has the highest technology, and it is also a cosmic world. The girls can only live better in the Dragon Ball world. The power of fate, unfortunately, this is only the primary power of fate. It can only change the fate of ordinary people, not even the fate of immortal turtles. If I want to change the fate of the strong, I can't achieve it with my current power of fate. Yizan had a plan for a long time. He decided to accompany his wife and daughters for a few years. 5 years later, Yizan stood in the outer space outside the Earth. He slowly closed his eyes, and for the first time gave up the fruit ability, instead relying on the power of destiny to travel the world. Fate is connected, the stars are confirmed, pass. Swish. In the darkness, the space around Yizan shattered like glass. The next second, Yizan took a step forward and walked into the black hole of Uzumaki. Virtual circle. The skeleton Emperor Balagang held his head in boredom, and the fighting performance of the two Yachukas made him feel particularly tired. Such a weak waste should be destroyed. The virtual flash bloomed, and the two Yachukas screamed and instantly turned into flying ashes. It's so boring. Balagang changed his posture lazily, looked up at the sky, the fire of the soul in the skull swayed gently. In a few days, I will organize some people to attack the Soul Society, and I will only have this place left. Some entertainment. He pondered silently. The dozens of Yachukas below did not move. Suddenly, a loud noise that shocked the soul exploded, and Balagan was shocked and quickly stood up. Boom. Rumbling. The endless vibration resounded throughout the virtual circle, and the pressure of ultimate was so terrifying that it was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on the top, causing Balagang to kneel in an instant. He stared at the sky in horror. To collapse. Balagang knelt down. Everyone in the Soul Society fell to the ground. Captain Yamamoto was terrified, and the hand holding Zanpakuto kept shaking. Oops, the first time I used the power of destiny to cross the world, I didn't control it well. The sky was shattered. Yizan stood tall in the void. With a smile on his lips, he could feel the force of destiny in this world crowding him out, but unfortunately, destiny has no subjective consciousness. The fate of the mere world of death cannot resist the strongest in the universe. Invasion of men. Suppression. Compromise. Breathing restrained, Yizan used the power of destiny he realized to contact the destiny of the world of death. Gradually, the broken sky recovered, and the fear of destroying the world slowly disappeared. Yizan's breath is declining, and it is constantly declining. Compared with the power that can destroy the planet at will, at this moment, his breath has dropped to the extreme. But if you look carefully, you can find that Yizan's body is full of blue light, which is spiritual power. The power of destiny in the world of Conan is too rudimentary, and the destiny of the world of death is more than 100 times stronger. Yizan slammed his mouth a few times, and finally stabilized his strength at about 5 times that of the captain's Raya. The fate of the world of the god of death is okay, but you actually know how to compromise, and let me comprehend fate at the cost of letting me use 5 times the captain's spiritual pressure. Once I use the ability of other worlds, I can't comprehend it. It doesn't matter, with my 5 times the captain's spiritual pressure, even if you simply release the spirit, it is not something that kittens and puppies can provoke. Quote. Yizan slowly landed on the ground, and what caught his eye was the vast white sand. The white sand, the wind howling, but there is no trace of life, the sand sea is endless. Yizan has walked for a long time, and the surrounding is still the same sand and bare rocks. No, maybe there is something different. Yizan frowned, his body suddenly flashed to the side, and the next second, a black monster appeared where he was standing. Faceless man, Yizan said subconsciously, and then knew that he was wrong. This is an empty circle, how could there be a cute faceless man? However. Hey, big brother, do you want to eat me? Yizan asked suspiciously, and broke a branch next to him. The next second, Killian pounced. Yizan jumped and circled around the sand like the wind. When Killian didn't react, he got to the back of the opponent and stabbed it hard. Scoff. It felt like stabbing a basketball with a needle. It first paused slowly, then pierced the epidermis, and pierced it with ease. Killian screamed in pain, and the harsh sound echoed in the open environment. Killian was dead. Yizan turned his head and looked into the distance, only to see a lot of shadowy objects approaching in the distance. A few of them were particularly huge, obviously also Killian. As expected of an imaginary circle, there are many such things. Yizan smiled, and rushed forward without waiting for the imaginary circles to come up. Unbeatable, completely unbeatable. Yizan took the branch and kept stabbing forward. The branch was wrapped in a thick layer of spiritual pressure, and there was no virtual energy to stop it for even a second. After a while, there were empty corpses piled up around him, and then a little bit decomposed into spirits and dissipated in the air. Just because there were too many emptiness rushing up, Yizan was always full of empty corpses. Suddenly, those virtual images sensed something and fled into the distance. Yizan put on an alert posture and watched the 2 humanoid creatures get closer and closer, one with a mask and the other with a pair of strange horns. The one with the horns I don't know, it's probably an Achukas. But that mask is Ulquiorra. 10 Blades 4th. Yizan smiled, he didn't expect to meet Shirin on the first day he came to this world. Yo, it's actually a human. The unnamed Achukas walked to Yizan's side and sniffed hard. When will humans be able to hunt Killian? There won't be a god of death inside. Yizan shook his head with a smile, and weighed the branches in his hand. The blue spiritual pressure on the branches was particularly dazzling. You want to escape. There is no food or water here. Even if you escape, you won't survive. Why don't you let me eat it? Oh, want to eat me? Why don't you try it? Yizan chuckled, picked up the branch and rushed up. Now that he has reached an agreement with the destiny of this world, he is the protagonist of this world. As long as he does not use the abilities of other worlds, he is the real protagonist, and the protagonist will be afraid of a ghost without a name. This is impossible. Yachukas is more advanced and more intelligent than Killian, but that is only compared to Killian. For Yizan, this difference is not something to be afraid of. Yizan's eyes narrowed slightly, and when the guy didn't respond, he picked him up, and then he jumped into the air. The branches seemed to be heavy, and easily smashed the bone armor on the opponent's body. Boom! Achukas fell to the ground, and the raised dust blocked his vision. Yizan deftly turned over in midair and slowly landed on the ground. The dust slowly settled, revealing Achukas, who was trapped in the semicircular pit, and Ulquiorra, who was always watching from a distance. Are you coming too? Yizan raised his eyebrows and looked at Ulquiorra, feeling a little cherishing talent in his heart. 4th of the 10 blades, I won't suffer as a younger brother, either surrender to me or die, you can choose. The form is completely reversed from just now.